Hello and welcome to FTD Talk. My name is John James and I am a writer and campaigner for male victims of female perpetrated domestic violence. Today we talk to Jerry about his experiences, including manipulation, stalking, and the role of the police. This is Jerry's story. So, welcome Jay to FTD Talk.
Thank you.
And I want to start by asking you how you and your abuser met.
We met through my first wife. She was actually a friend of my first wife's, and when my marriage went belly up, she was suddenly there as the support, the prop. She came across as though she cared. Offered me somewhere to stay, the usual.
And did you fall into a relationship straight away, or did it take some time?
It wasn't supposed to be a relationship. I just saw her as a friend to start with. I was there for, I think, 4 days. She had a very young son at the time, and he walked down the stairs with a gold dad ring. Now, I had 2 children with my first wife, and she knew I was very child orientated. The story I got told was that she had bought this ring a few years previously because he didn't have a dad in his life.
Yeah.
And that it was that she had told him that when he met someone that he liked, he could ask them to be his dad.
Right.
Usual melt of the heart moment, all the rest of it. Such a sweet thing to do, and never even clicked that the ring looked brand new and it fit me perfectly. I've got very big hands, and most people, when they find out what ring size I am, it's like, oh my God, do you make rings in that size? So to have a ring fit perfectly meant she knew exactly what size my hands were.
Yeah.
But of course, at the time, didn't click. I just thought it was such the sweetest thing ever. And that's when the relationship started.
And how did you feel with the relationship? Were you happy about it? Did you have good times together?
Yeah, it started off, I mean, the first few months were really good. There was a few little nags in the back of my mind. It all happened very quickly. I mean, I was still on the rebound from my first wife. There was problems with contact with children, all the usual things that newly sort of separated couples go through. But she always seemed to be there with the right words, it was too, looking back now, at the time it felt right. Looking back now, it was too perfect.
Yeah.
It's very hard to describe, but it was almost like she could read my mind and knew exactly what to say, what to do, how to act, how to behave, to keep me off guard.
Yeah.
But whilst we were starting off on this relationship, she was also talking to other people online still. It then came out that she was talking to a chap from overseas who she'd promised to go and live with. Again, it's at the time I felt sort of slightly threatened, all the rest of it, but she kept telling me that it was me that she wanted, I was the one, blah blah blah. Look, again, with hindsight's a great thing. I think it was to pressure me into committing to a relationship by making it as a competition. And if I didn't commit to her, then she was going to go off with somebody else. Again, very, very, very orchestrated, almost from day one.
So you'd got that cloud over your head straight away then?
Yeah.
Almost.
There was a lot of issues to start with. Looking back, I should have seen as red flags, but didn't, because back then and all the way through the relationship, to me, domestic abuse, domestic violence, anything like that, it was a woman-only thing. Men didn't suffer from it. So I never even put 2 and 2 together. There was issues over the misuse of prescription medication. She was getting prescription painkillers and taking them, which again, didn't think anything of, because she complained that she had a back injury.
Yeah.
Which again, I actually broke my back in 2001, so could sympathise with it. Like I said, everything she did was orchestrated to make me feel sympathetic towards her, to feel sorry for her in some respects.
Yeah. Do you think the back injury was invented because she knew you'd broken your back?
It was a way to get medication. I mean, I don't want to jump on too far ahead in the story, but that was sort of halfway through as to just how good an actress she was, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, let's go back then. And when did you think that things weren't quite right?
After we'd been together about a year, we moved close to my children. She'd had a major falling out with her family. So we moved a couple 100 miles to be closer to where my children were. And within a few months of being there, she started an affair with my best friend, threw me out. And I thought, well, that's it, that's the end of it. But then that fizzled out. I was sofa surfing at the time, and then she came straight back to me, and it was, well, you'll have nowhere to take your children for Christmas. You won't be able to have your children for Christmas. As using my children as a weapon to get me back. Yeah. That's when I first started to get misgivings, but stupid, I kept forgiving her. I kept thinking of reasons why she was being this way. She had portrayed herself as a victim of very abusive past relationships. So I felt sort of the instant, sorrow for her that she'd been through all this, she'd suffered all of this.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I said, my children were a huge part of my life, and missing them at Christmas would have been a huge deal for me.
Yeah.
So, stupidly, I went back, even though sort of the friends, family was saying to me, "There's something not right. There's something not right." I actually fell out with my parents for a long time over it because they kept saying that she's not quite right. There's something not right about all of this. And I suppose pride got in the way that, no, she's my girlfriend, I'm going to stand by her.
Yeah, and did you ever feel isolated then because you were defending her so much and cutting people off?
Yeah. Within 6 months, we'd moved back up to Wales, closer to her family again, away from sort of all my friends, family, the whole lot. And again, I think it was her way just to isolate me away from anybody close, because obviously she knew by now what the friends were saying, what family were saying, and she obviously didn't like it.
And how did you feel in yourself, and how did you feel about the relationship at this point?
I thought we were getting on again, that we'd put the past behind us, that we could start again, we could start afresh. She never admitted to the relationship, even though my best mate actually sort of, not to hurt me, but about a month afterwards, I collared him online and I said, what the hell were you playing at, And he admitted that, yeah, they had this affair. It was wrong of him. He felt ashamed about it. And he understood my anger, but she never once in the 11 years we were together did she ever admit that she'd had an affair. So that was always a cloud over the relationship, because I suppose half of me knew the truth, but the other half wanted to deny it because she was saying, no, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm. And What kind of abuse were you suffering at this point? Was it verbal abuse or emotional abuse, physical?
Emotional and verbal. But about this time, she had always said that she had suffered, among other things, with severe PMT, and that her doctors had told her that she could actually stab somebody and get away with it because of the severity of the PMT. Being a bloke, you know, at that time I didn't understand things like PMT and PMS, or
Yeah.
I knew that women suffered, but not to what degree. So again, I took her word as the truth. She got no reason to lie to me. And eventually, I can't remember exactly how far in, but she actually put a steak knife into my leg. In a restaurant, in front of my kids, or in front of my kids and her child as well. Apparently, I'd done something or said something that annoyed her. And under the table, she just stabbed me in the thigh with a steak knife.
Jesus.
My instant first thoughts were obviously to not let the kids see or realise what had happened, because I didn't want them being distressed because they were only young at the time.
Yeah.
And I felt sorry for her because she got into my head that she suffered with severe PMT, and I thought it was all tied into that. So I actually felt sorry for her that I'd obviously done something that had triggered her. And I blamed
you blamed yourself even though she'd attacked you like that?
Yeah, because she'd got into my head that it wasn't her fault. If anything like that ever happened, it wouldn't be her fault. So it was all, looking back now, it's almost like she planned the whole thing. She knew what her behaviour was. So from day one, she'd been sowing the seeds to make sure she could get away with it.
Yeah. And how far into the relationship was this?
It was only probably about 2 years in.
Yeah. Did it escalate from there?
I was attacked with a knife 3 times in total. The others were on my hands, with defensive wounds.
Yeah.
She's punched me, slapped, bitten. Again, because she blamed her PMT for it. She couldn't control it. She was always sorry afterwards. She didn't mean it. The usual contrition, but it didn't stop it happening again. To the point that her son actually called her shouty mummy, because she spent so much time losing her temper.
And were you always defensive of her, or did your feelings begin to change?
I was always defensive of her right to the very end. I sound stupid saying this, but looking back, I think, what an idiot, what a fool, how could I have been so gullible? But she had a way to twist everything to make herself out to be the victim, to make herself out to be the one suffering. And 9 times out of 10, she'd twist it that it was my fault in some way or another, that I'd caused the outburst or caused the argument or caused her to seek solace online with other people. It was always my fault because I'd done something or said something or behaved in. So I started blaming myself.
Yeah.
Rather than blame her for it. And when she, probably 2000, so about 3.5 years in, 4 years in, she'd always been in and out of hospital with her back, claiming that she couldn't walk, she was paralysed from the waist down, and then anything between 3 and 5 days later, she'd discharge herself, but with strong painkillers again.
Mm-hmm.
It came to a head, it would have been 2008, so 4 years in. She went into hospital. doctors had already by this point asked me if I thought it was in her head, because there was no medical reason why she was, suffering back problems, suffering paralysis. They'd done every single test known to man, couldn't find anything wrong. But she presented at the hospital unable to walk, unable to move. So they had to do duty of care and treat her as she was in chronic pain. In 2008, she put herself into a wheelchair. Said she couldn't walk, came out of hospital, had to get a wheelchair, make up a bedroom downstairs for her, have carers, the whole 9 yards of it.
Yeah.
So I became her full-time carer. I was also raising her son. This lasted for about a year. We talked about getting married, and she wanted to get married. So that was all planned for 2009. In 2009, we had a new GP start. He walked into the house, and because of the amount of medication and what she was on, I kept a medical chart, because she was taking a lot of morphine, codeine. So to make sure that she got the exact right doses, I was keeping a medical chart of exactly what she was taking. And the GP walked into the house and he said, right, so what you on? So I gave him the medical chart to look at. He took one look through it and he said, my God, you're an addict. That was his words to her.
Yeah.
The day after that, she suddenly started walking again.
Right.
Within 3 months, she was painkiller free. And walked down the aisle when we got married.
And what were your feelings at that time? Were you over the moon about that? The recovery and.
Yeah, I was over the moon because it was like, my God, she's done it, she's beaten it, she was determined to do this. And because at the time I was also, we were both quite heavily involved with the church as well, and the church been praying for is an evangelical church. I was thinking, it's a miracle, all our prayers have been answered. Didn't for 1 minute think anything of it. As again, hindsight is a wonderful thing. The trigger was the GP telling her she was an addict, and I don't think she liked being caught out.
Yeah.
She's never been able to accept that she's ever in the wrong. So with the doctor telling her that, I think that was a trigger for it that, made her change her lifestyle at that point. After that, there was never another trip to hospital. Never a trip to the doctors for painkillers, anything.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I will add, that the problem is so much happened in the 11 years, I forget stuff. And one of the admissions to hospital, I'd had a phone call in 2008 to say that my dad had been taken to hospital, and to basically get down there as soon as I could. So jumped in the car, drove down. My dad wasn't in the best of health as it was. Got told the hospital it was just a matter of time. Could be hours, it could be days, but he wasn't going to walk out of hospital again. That night, I got a phone call from the local hospital in Wales to say that my ex had put herself into the hospital, unable to walk, and I had to go home because her son had nobody to care for him. Even though her parents lived half an hour down the road. So, like an idiot, I drove back up to Wales. I was there for 24 hours, in which time my dad died. The day after she discharged, I rang her parents up and said, look, you're going to have to take her son because I need to get down to Southampton. They came, picked him up the day after she discharged herself from hospital. So I wasn't there when my mum needed me the most, when my dad died.
And do you believe she did that on purpose?
Yeah, it's because I dared to put somebody else before her or her son.
Yeah.
You know, you don't just go into hospital and able to walk and then 2 days later come out walking.
Yeah. That's evil. That's really evil.
Yeah, as I said, at the time, that always stuck with me. Because it was, in my mind, well, not straight away, but later on, when I started questioning everything, then it's started coming to the fore that, you know, had she done that deliberately, had that been a manipulation?
Mm-hmm.
At the time, obviously, I was just too consumed with sort of my dad's death, her being unwell, what her son was doing, the whole lot. So, and obviously, we're just talking about getting married at that point, so there was the wedding planning as well going into it. So it was like everything.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure for one person to take, isn't it?
Yeah. And it smothered it a little bit. And of course, then she was into the wheelchair, and that then took over my life completely.
So after you got married, was married life good?
Looking back, no, it got worse. The affairs started more often. She'd always find an excuse to end our relationship so she could pursue an affair. The first time, her mum actually rang me up. Like I said, they lived about half an hour down the road. They had a lovely house. She turned around and said, you know, there's plenty of room here. Why don't you come up here and stay here? We know what she's like. So I went and stayed with them. Certain information came to light that started making me question a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't go into that because that's pertaining to somebody else as well. So,
Yeah.
but it made me question her, how genuine she was and how truthful she was. But one night, me and one of her sisters said to me, you know, you need to get out of your house. You need to get out. You know, you're just moping around doing nothing. So she said there was a poker night being played in one of the local towns, and one of the pubs held a poker evening. She knew I loved poker, so it's a case of, all right, I'll come with you. You know, we'll go and play poker. I was there for about an hour when my phone rang. What are you doing what are you doing with my sister? Nothing. She's brought me out to play poker. We're in the middle of a pub playing poker. Well, I want you here now. And she used her son that he was unsettled, not feeling very well, and so I literally had to just cash in my chips there and then and leave.
Mm-hmm.
And even at that point, we weren't together, but it was still, she still had me because she'd used, like I said, you know, she used her son who had, you know, some medical issues, and she'd use that then to lure me back.
Yeah.
Because she didn't drive, it was a case, well, if you've got to go to hospital, you know, I need you here. So, like an idiot, I dropped everything and went.
Because you've said that quite a few times, that you're an idiot and you're a fool, and I can tell you weren't.
Yeah, looking back, like I said, you know, I use it now more because I kick myself for how idiotic I was back then. But obviously, I'm looking back at my past with hindsight, and you know, know exactly what she was now, and you know that her behaviour was wrong. But when you're in that situation, you know, so many times I've said, and you know, I will hold my hands up to being one who says, you know, wrongly says, when you hear about women who have been abused, why did they stay? Oh, because they love the person. Well, that's no excuse. Well, actually, it is, because when you do love somebody, you do turn a blind eye to a lot of what they do.
Yeah.
You know, but it's how you've got to go through it to understand it.
Yeah, definitely. And did you tell anybody about what you were going through?
No. The only people who knew were my parents. Well, by this point, my mum, who would be very vocal with her opinions. But again, I tended to turn it, I'd gripe to her and have a complaint. But then if she then said to me, you should leave, well, don't butt into my life, because I didn't want somebody else telling me what to do.
Yeah.
I became very defensive again.
And why didn't you tell friends about what was going on?
Because I genuinely didn't see it.
Yeah.
The first time I actually saw it was the day I left. And the police told me what had been going on. And that was the first time I ever saw the whole pattern. And suddenly it was like a light bulb had gone on in my head. And it's like, oh my God, have I really been this much of an idiot? Have I really been this stupid? Have I really been, so gullible?
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like my whole world crashed down at that point.
And the police's involvement, how did they get involved?
That was right at the end. They were, when it all came to a head, was 2014. We'd been married for 5 years by that point. Living literally on the doorstep of all her family and friends. And it came to light that she was having yet another affair. And it was in the run-up to Christmas. She had told such a blatant lie about it, and I knew it was a lie. It just triggered an argument. Her son then turned around and said, because her son had just turned 16, he said that he wanted his disability money paid to him direct. She'd always been very financially controlling as well, including I was on benefits because of my back, but I wasn't allowed to claim incapacity benefit. She claimed income support for us both because I wasn't allowed any of my own money. She also claimed disability for her son, and that was paid to her as well. When he said that he wanted it paid to himself, she went up the wall, over the roof, down the other side for about 4 hours. Just a wild tirade of screaming and shouting both at him and at me. I was the worst parent going. I was a joke. I was this, I was that, I was the other. He was selfish, ungrateful. If he wanted his money, well, he would have to fill all the forms in himself. And he didn't know how to fill the forms, and he would lose the money. And so in the end, I turned around and I said to her son, I said, come on, I said, we're leaving. I said, let Mummy calm down. We're going out for a walk. I walked out the door. He followed me literally about 10 seconds later. And he said, because he called me Dad, he said, Dad, he said, Mum's on the phone to the police saying you've abducted me. He was 16, played rugby, quite a big lad. So yeah, with a back injury, I could have thrown him over my shoulder and carried him off down the street, So I rang the police and I said, look, I said, I believe you've been alerted to this. I said, I haven't abducted him. I said, she's going absolutely doolally in the house. I said, I've taken her son out for a walk. I said, well, why don't you drive down? I said, I can't because the car's in her name. Even though she didn't drive, even the car had to be registered in her name. And I knew if I'd taken the car, she'd have reported me to the police for stealing the car.
Yeah.
So we walked down. I said, look, I can come to the police station now if you want. She said, if you don't mind, just so we can make sure that you're both all right. I said, yeah, no problem at all. So I walked into the police station. They took my stepson into one room, me into the other. Talked to me, obviously talked to him. And WPC I spoke to turned around and said, you do realise that both you and your stepson are the victims of domestic abuse and domestic violence, don't you? No. Well, you are. She said, some of the questions I've been asking you are part of, I think she called it a dart score or something.
Yeah.
And she said, you've actually got one of the highest scores I've ever seen. And I hadn't realised because she wasn't asking them as, it wasn't like a question and answer, do you do this? Do you? They were added into the sort of general chit chat that we were having.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even realised she'd been taking scores. And it was quite scary when I realised just what she'd actually done to me over the, sort of the 11 years we were together. That was the sort of beginning of the police involvement. Stupidly, I went back. She managed to talk me into going back there to stay because I had nowhere else to stay. But it was as, you know, sharing the house rather than being together. I was staying in one room, she was staying in another. And then she called the police one night, and I can't even remember why. The police turned up and they sort of went through everything with me, and he said, I hate to say this, he said, but if we get called again, it'll be you that gets arrested. And I'm like, why? You know, I've done nothing. He said, it's to prevent a breach of the peace. He said, it's not a criminal arrest. He said, it's what we call a technical arrest. He says, but you will be arrested and removed from the property. So it's like, okay. I'm the victim. I'm the one that's getting abused, but I'm also the one that will get arrested and removed from the property. Great. Of course, that just emboldened her even more then, because she knew that she had all the power.
Yeah, yeah.
So 2 days later, I moved out. She said I could take the car. So I asked for that in writing, which she did do. And I drove down to my parents, or down to my mum's. Within hours of being there, the online abuse had started. There was her and her friends posting all sorts of abuse, nastiness, the whole 9 yards, all over Twitter, Facebook, directly to me. So I went back to the police. I said, you know, surely this is harassment. This is, you know, I've just got away from this. We can't do anything to stop it because she's not actually naming you directly.
But she's posting to you personally, though?
No, it was all posted.
Posted openly.
Yeah, her friends were sending stuff to me, but they were only reacting to what she was telling them. But the bit I haven't said is, at this point, she was actually training to be she was doing her law degree to be a solicitor. So she knew the law. So she knew what she could post and get away with and what she could post and wouldn't. So she was posting things, you know, that even the police said, we know it's about you, but because I'm not specifically named in it, they couldn't do anything.
Right.
Unless she'd actually put my name physically on these posts, there was absolutely nothing they could do, because it's not harassment. It's only harassment when you're named. So after a few weeks at my mum's, I'd had enough of all this. So I thought, I'm going to set the record straight. So I wrote a blog that basically told the whole 11 years of history of everything. The lies she had told, the allegations, the drug abuse or the prescription drug abuse, the whole lot. Within 24 hours, I had the police at my door serving me with a PIN notice for harassment.
Did you name her in the piece?
Yeah, problem was I did. I didn't know the law. You know, like I said, she knew not to name me because obviously she was studying law. I didn't know that bit of it. So because I put this is about me and my ex-fiance or ex-wife, you know, she was named throughout it. And yeah, I got served with a PIN notice for harassment. The police did say to me at the time, they see so many of these cases where the innocent party is the one that actually ends up in trouble because we don't have we react more on emotion than understanding. Abusers tend to know all the limits of what they can do and can't do, what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. The normal person on the street doesn't know that because we wouldn't even think about looking it up.
Yeah.
And that's why victims often fall foul of the law afterwards, because we aren't that clued up on it. She certainly knew what she could and couldn't do and what she could and couldn't say. So I left my mum's because I didn't want to bring any more trouble to her doorstep.
Yeah.
I thought the only way I can disappear is to literally disappear. I went to London to live on the streets for about just over a month, see if I could just become a face in the crowd. And then a friend messaged me to say that they were going to South Africa for a month, and I could stay at theirs for the month and house sit. The only problem was back in Wales, but I thought 4 walls around me, a roof over my head, nobody will know I'm there. Perfect. So I got the train up, moved in, was there for 3 days when I got a message on WhatsApp. What are you doing in? I won't say the names of the places, but up the road. I was literally about 8 miles away from where we used to live. But within 3 days of me being there, she knew I was there, which was very spooky.
Was that somebody telling her? Was she spying on you, or?
She was having me followed. She was having me, but not just obviously a man in a coat with a pair of binoculars. As we'll come out, she was, her past was that she'd gone to a boarding school for military children. So all her friends and peer group were military, police, prison service. A lot of them had drifted into sort of those services. So she had means to access information. She was being alerted to every move I made, basically.
Wow.
I spoke to, at this point, I was then put in touch with no, I tell a lie, at this point, I took an overdose. I just couldn't take any more of it. I thought it was the only way I was ever going to get away from her. So, ended up in hospital. Apparently, I was about 2 hours away from death. I was released after.
Yeah, so you were that down. It had just taken its toll.
Yeah, I couldn't take any more because I thought there's no way I'm ever going to get away from her. Because it seemed like every time I turned to the police, they weren't interested, but every time she turned to the police, they would be at her beck and call. Having had such a positive from the police to start with, when they said that, you were the victim of, it was literally like, well, you're the victim of it, but goodbye.
Yeah.
That's it. But this time around, when I came out of hospital, obviously I had a bit more support. A CPN put me in touch with a domestic violence group that was in that area. They started talking about, the future and what I could do, what my options were, stuff that they could look into to try and help me. So it's like, brilliant. I could move forward. Then it turned out that she had then started claiming that she was the victim of abuse and domestic violence and was being supported by the same agency. Yeah. But at this point, we were still communicating because I didn't realise that she was game playing at this point. We'd started a very tentative email conversation, and she told me by email that she was wanting to move away from that area, not because of me, but because her family was putting on her all the time. She was expected to go and work at her mum's business. Her sisters wanted her to do stuff with their businesses, and she didn't like being put on all the time. And that was the reason she wanted to move away. and that this agency were going to sort out a managed move for her. So I gave this to the agency. I said, well, look, I said, if this is because my IDVA actually warned me that she was also on their books, but seeing a different IDVA there. So I gave them this email. I said, well, look, I said, this is why she's using you. And it's like, yeah, you know, we know we're being used, but we can't do anything about it because she's been referred. Great.
Right. Okay. That doesn't make much sense, but
No. I've come to the realization that if you're a female, and maybe I'm generalizing here and wrong to say this, but from my perspective, if you're a female, you get everything thrown at you. As much help and support as you want, even if the proof's there to say that you're not actually being 100% honest or you're not being 100% truthful, nobody dare call it out and say you're lying. Whereas if you're a male, there's very little support.
even though the police have already told you that you've had a really high score on the domestic violence.
Yeah, I can't remember what the meeting's called. Is it Marek or something? Which is a multi-agency meeting they do after a domestic violence. There was a Marek held because of the obviously score level and the concerns of the police. Because one of the things I raised with them was the care of her child. There'd been a lot of issues there that had been flagged up. So again, because we were still talking at this point, I found stuff out that had happened afterwards. All social services did was send her a letter saying, we're aware that malicious complaints can happen in this situation. If you have any trouble, give us a call on. They didn't even bother to investigate because it was me making the complaint, being the male. They dismissed it as malicious.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's the whole. It's why I am so vocal now on things like Twitter and that, because 50% of the population are being ignored, and children are being put at risk still by the stereotypical image that only men abuse. And that's my big argument: is no, it's not a gendered crime. Anybody can abuse. Anybody can be a victim. It doesn't matter if you're, straight, gay, pink, blue, black, white, brown, indigo, whatever you are, you can be a victim and you can be an abuser. And until people wake up to that, we're still going to have a problem in this country.
Well, we're still going to have a problem worldwide, aren't we, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's worldwide, but unfortunately, I only concentrate more on this country because it's not.
Yeah.
In this country, we're supposed to be forward-thinking, a developed country. You can't change certain cultures overnight. When you look at the whole world, there are cultural differences as well as, sort of what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
And to change some countries, you'd need to change the culture as well. But in this country, certainly in the West, we should be awake enough to see that, it's wrong and that it can happen to anybody. I get frustrated when I see TV programs. My current girlfriend, she loves the soaps. And you'll watch a woman on those slap a man as though it's perfectly acceptable to do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, so they're promoting violence. They're promoting that it's all right to slap a bloke. If the bloke's upset you in some way, give him a slap. And nobody seems to think there's anything wrong with that. And that's what needs to be changing. Because if that was reversed, if it was the man slapping the woman, there'd be an outcry.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping this podcast can do. so many brave people such as yourself have come forward to speak on the show, and I'm hoping that a lot more do.
There's a lot out there. I mean, it's slowly changing. I mean, my story didn't end with that. I mean, I was put into a refuge, and I was in a refuge for nearly 9 months because of the severity of everything that had gone on. She managed to find me in one refuge, so they moved me to another. They then moved me to, we sat down and we looked at a map of the UK, and it was decided on which area neither of us had any connection to at all that, you know, we knew of.
Yeah.
And I chose an area that was completely new to me. As far as I was aware, it was, you know, she'd never been to this area, that I could start again where I was. I had an email from an unknown address 3 days after I moved in to this property that said, have a nice life in Llandudno, Jerry. Or should I say Mark? Because when I moved here, I was going to change my name. I talked about it with the refuge service and the police to give myself a completely new identity. She was aware of that new identity.
Well, how the hell was she aware of that?
Right, I'll get to that now. After I'd settled here, I'd been here a few months and met somebody else who we started sort of tentatively talking at first. She had been through a very, very abusive past, and that's how we sort of clicked, was not comparing notes, but obviously being able to understand each other. And she started supporting me through everything, and I was speaking to the local, what they call the Sapphire team up here, which is the sexual abuse and domestic violence team. And during the time that me and the ex were talking, she'd been sending me very explicit pictures of herself. Every time I was talking to the police, she'd start talking to me and send semi-naked pictures, things like that. Being a bloke, you don't think anything of it. However, the Sapphire team said to me, you do realise that that was actually sexual abuse. She's using that to still control you.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, it's actually classed as sexual abuse. Oh, okay. And she'd taken loans out in my name, both whilst we were together and in the couple of months after I'd left. She'd taken loans out, but used my name, my details. So they said, well, that's financial abuse. There'd been a lot of incidents happen that I put down to like the finding me in the refuges, things like that, but were stalking. So that was passed back to the police as a serious concern. They went to talk to her. The next thing is I had the police on my doorstep arresting me for historic rape, financial, what was it called? Fraud by misrepresentation, and stalking and harassment. Basically, the three things that they'd identified that she had been doing to me, I was then being arrested for.
Jesus.
I spent 6 months on bail. After 3 months, the stalking and harassment was thrown out by the force that was investigating that. But what they never investigated was, because I didn't go out the door, because I was too scared to walk out the door by this point, because I didn't know who was there, who she knew, how she knew all the information she was getting. I stayed inside my four walls, and that was it. Like, this was my safety. My daughter came up from her first marriage for the summer holidays. And on 5 separate occasions, I went out the house 3 times to go sightseeing in sort of the very rural parts of Wales, North Wales. And the other 2 times were I'd driven her back to her mum's down in Southampton, stayed at my mum's for a couple of days because it was her birthday 2 days later, and then bought her a present on her birthday and delivered it before driving back up here. But those were the 5 days when allegedly I'd driven to where she now lived, even though I hadn't known she'd moved, to stalk her there. She knew the exact 5 days my car wasn't outside my house.
Wow.
But the police weren't interested. The other two charges, they took nearly 2 years to investigate. And finally I got NFA'd when the officer rang me up and said, now we know exactly who she is and what she is, with no further action in these cases. I know from previously that I wasn't the first person she'd accused of sexual impropriety. It was her go-to for getting revenge on people.
Yeah. And the police knew this?
Once they had located the different names that she used, yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't all under one name, it was under multiple different names. But they'd finally managed to tie it all together when they'd liaised with different colleagues from different forces. They had realised that there was a pattern.
And was she punished for false accusation?
No, at that point, it was just before Christmas, and I got told that, you know, that was it. But because there was no proof that it was a false accusation at this point, I was just told that she'd be told that there was no further action. That was the end of it. So I thought, well, that's it, done and dusted. Could finally move on with my life. A month later, I'd only just got my phone and laptop back from the police, who had it for 2 years of the investigation. I get a knock at the door, 7 o'clock in the morning. 4 police officers stood there. We're arresting you for stalking and harassment. What? Do you have a set of keys? No. We need to search the house. Of course, tip the house upside down again, searching for this set of keys. Go back to the police station, get interviewed, another 12 hours spent in the local custody suite. Allegedly, amongst other things, I'd broken into her house, stolen a set of keys, had moved garden furniture around to upset her, left money on her doorstep, and then written a Facebook confession that I didn't send to her, but sent to her boyfriend, partner, whatever you want to call him, confessing that I'd got away with it, that I'd always said that I'd be able to get away with it. The whole, you know, basically, it corroborated everything that she had told the police, or alleged that I'd allegedly done to her.
Yeah.
And that I'd broken into their house, and that it was all me, and I was going to get away with it. So that was then investigated again for 3 months until it got moved to a different investigating officer who said that they believed that she was being given information by someone on the inside. One of her friends was feeding her information coming straight off the police national computer. So every time I walked into the police to report something, she knew about it before she had a visit at the door, so she could build her own story. And that's how she was finding out all the information.
Yeah, so she had somebody inside the police.
Yeah.
Was that investigated?
That was the implication, was that's all that she came up with, was that, you know, there must be somebody on the inside who's feeding her the information. When they finished the investigation, the officer actually, and I've still got all the emails on my phone, said, "Could you, do you have a second phone?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "But you never asked for it when you came round." I said, "I gave you back." I said, "Your officers walked into my house and said, we want your phone and laptop." I said, "I don't just pick them up from you a week beforehand, not having had them for 2 years." I said, "So I gave you them back." I said, "They never asked for another phone." Well, of course, in that 2 years, I'd obviously got myself another phone. Said, "Do you have the IMEI and ISEI number?" I think it was she wanted for the phone. I said, "Well, I can get them for you. You know, how do I find them?" So I gave her all the details she needed. She came back to me within 24 hours and said, "Do you recognise this phone number? You rang it at," I can't remember the exact time frame or dates, but it's something like the 11:20 on the 11th of January. Well, by this point, we're sort of in May, June. So I'm like, well, I can't remember who I rang on a specific day, a specific time, 6 months. Had you have asked me this back in January when you arrested me, I could have probably told you. Well, as it turned out, it was actually the granddaughter of a friend of mine. And she had asked if I could pick a wardrobe up for her. So I'd gone down, picked the wardrobe up and driven up to hers, realised the wardrobe was a lot bigger than she had expected it to be and a lot heavier because it was solid wood. I'd rung her from outside to say, "Can't manage this on my own, you're going to have to come down and give me a hand." Well, of course, it put me in the town where I live at a specific time, which at exactly that same time, the Facebook had been created where my ex lives, and the email and the confession was sent from where my ex was now living. So that it was the one mistake she made that proved everything that she was saying was a lie. I could prove I was 200 miles away at the same time that this Facebook was being created. And so she said, she said, "All I can tell you, we are going to go round and speak to your ex about perverting the course of justice." I said, "Well, can you do more than speak to her? You know, can you like arrest her or, you know, charge her with it?" I said, "Because she put me through 4 years of hell by this point, or 3.5 years of hell." "No, because of data protection, I can't tell you any more than that." "Pardon?" She said, "The way the law works is because she's lied to the police are deemed to be the victims, not you."
Even though she lied to the police about you.
Even though she'd lied about me and put me through 3.5 years of hell.
And a suicide attempt.
Yeah. I wasn't the victim. Over the 3.5 years, my arms now look like a road map of Britain from scars. There was 2 suicide attempts. Multiple times when I could have quite easily gone off the edge of a cliff because I just couldn't take any more. But yeah, I wasn't the victim, apparently. And since it's all blown over, there's been absolutely no offer of support, help, or anything.
So how are you now? And how do you feel talking about it today?
It's hard because it's like I still blame myself for a lot of it. Not for her behaviour, but for not getting out sooner. I feel like I was stupid. But I mean, I'm in a good place now. I've got a very, very supportive girlfriend who understands what I've been through, where I've been, and when I have bad days, she knows to just give me the little extra space just to wrap my head up into and sort myself out. If I get too isolated, she knows to sort of drag me out the door and say, "No, you can come and face the world."
Excellent.
So, you know, I still have bad days. There's still days when unwanted thoughts are very close to the surface, and I don't know if they'll ever go away.
And what do you do to cope?
I used to, as I've already said, I used to cut myself because I could deal with the physical pain. You know, using a knife on my arm was something I could deal with. It was something I could see. It was something tangible. I can't deal with mental pain. Now, I drink. Not to an excess where I'm drunk all the time, but I will almost every night have a drink, at least one.
Yeah.
It just deadens the brain a little bit. And that's my coping mechanism and work. I've been very fortunate to find a job that ignored my back and ignored my past and ignored everything else. They've given me a chance to work, and I was lucky enough to be able to work through this pandemic. So I've kept busy with that, but
yeah,
I can let that take over at times, because I will do 60, 70, 80-hour plus weeks if I need to wear myself out.
yeah. And are you seeking any help with how you're feeling?
Unfortunately, mental health in general where I am is laughable. I was sent to the local mental health unit about 2 years ago now. A counsellor I was speaking to at the time, which wasn't NHS, it was a private charity. They provided a counsellor to try and help me through things. She was that worried about my state of mind that I basically had to go straight to my GP, tell my GP, and then go straight to the mental health unit to discuss with them how I was feeling and what thoughts I had on my mind. The suggestion was I go out and buy a colouring book and do colouring. That was their offer of help.
Right.
As I pointed out to them, the last time I did colouring, I was 8 years old, and it pissed me off back then. I'm now 50. There is no way I'm going to do it now. You know, but that was the mindful or something like that, colouring, and that was their sort of offer of help. So I was like, yeah, forget that then.
So how do you see your future now? You're just taking it day by day?
I take it day by day. I can't manage that, and it's hour by hour sometimes.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot to look forward to in the future. I know that.
Good.
Current girlfriend, couldn't fault her for the world. She's been an absolute rock. There are times, certainly when the police were involved, where I've tried to push her away because, in my mind, she didn't sign up for any of this. You know, it's my ex that's causing the problem. It shouldn't be causing her problems. So I've tried to push her away. I've tried to end it. Fortunately, she wouldn't let me.
Good on her.
Yeah, she's got more sense than I have sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I've got a lot to look forward to.
Good.
There's always that anchor dragging me backwards. She'll say things to me like, you know, I don't say I love you, or I don't love her. That all ties back to my ex, because it was one of the things in an email she sent me after it ended. The reason that she had, in her words, sought solace online, in other words, had affairs, was because I was unsupportive, because I told her all the time I loved her when she was putting weight on. If she put weight on it, I was like, well, it doesn't matter if you're 12 stone or 22 stone. You know, I love you as a person. You know, your weight doesn't change you. Apparently, that being supportive. And that's why she's so. There's still little triggers in my own brain that affect how I am today. You know, occasionally we'll snap at each other because one of us has said something that's a trigger.
Yeah.
But we talk about it afterwards and work through it. It's a case of, no, it's, you know, we both try and leave our pasts behind. Unfortunately, you know, you can't always leave your past behind because some things are so deeply rooted. You know, she did such a good job of getting into my brain and making me believe different things. Unfortunately, she was one of these people who could tell you that black was white and give you a convincing argument that would actually make you doubt whether you were right or wrong. You know, she was just one of these who could convince you of anything.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that you've got somebody supporting you now. And I'm glad to hear that you've got things to look forward to, which is great.
Yeah, it's on the way up, but like it's changed who I am. I would love to go back to the person I was before I met her, but I think that person's dead.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the things that you can't undo, and anybody who's been a victim, I suppose, will understand that you can never change or you can never undo the damage that's been done. It changes who you are completely.
Yeah, it does. It does change who you are. I think it changes the way you see the world. I think it changes the way you see other people. Makes you more aware of yourself and other people as well.
It does, but it also creates huge trust issues as well. You know, when me and my girlfriend got together, it took me a long time to trust her or believe what she was saying to me, because you're always thinking, is this another story? Is this another yarn? And even
How long have you been together, you and your new partner?
4 years now.
4 years.
We met online. We started talking online whilst I was still in the refuge. We started talking online.
Yeah.
Most of it was just about sort of what we've both been through and our histories and everything. It was only when I came out, and I'd moved into my house, and like I said, 3 days later, I got this message saying she knew where I was and she knew I was going to change my name. Current girlfriend turned around and said, "Well, move down here," because she lived about 40 miles down the road. And she said, "Move down here. Don't stay there. Move down here." So I did. I moved down there for 3 months before we moved back to the house, just as a way to break or try and break her being able to follow me and stalk me. Didn't work, but hey ho. At that point, I didn't realise she had somebody so close to everything, knowing every movement I made.
Well, I think you've done an awesome thing today by talking about it all.
I just want to be aware that it does happen, and it doesn't matter, you know, if, like me, I mean, I'm 6 foot, quite stockily built, but it doesn't matter if you're 6 foot male or a 5 foot female. It can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And people have said to me since, why didn't you know, when she stabbed you, why didn't you hit her back? Why didn't you do? I was brought up with that you never hit a woman.
Yeah.
And that was the mentality I have, is you never, ever hit a woman. Women and children are, you know, maybe misogynistic, maybe, you know, but you protect them. Women and children, it's a man's job to protect. And that's how I was brought up. So no matter what she did, I will protect her.
Yeah, and you already explained anyway that you were, you know, you were worried about her because you'd already planted that thought in your head that it was because of PMTs.
Yeah, that was it. So, but it was the combination of the two. Is one, you never hit a woman, you protect them. Two, she had planted the seed that it was a medical problem, and like I said, you know, it was. I felt sorry for it at first and defensive. So it was like, well, I'm not going to tell anybody what happened. I actually walked out of the restaurant with about 4 serviettes shoved down my trousers to stop any blood showing through, because I didn't want anybody to see.
Well, thanks, Jay, for talking to me today.
No problem.
And, you know, the bravery of the guys that are coming forward and speaking is just, it's humbling to me. And I really appreciate it. Thanks very much.
No problem. Take care and keep doing the work you're doing. The people need to be heard.
Thanks, man. I'll do my best. You take care.
And you, look after yourself.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello and thank you for watching. Well, that's it. That was the final episode of FTD Talk for Season 1. I want to thank everybody who took part in the show. I want to thank all the male victims of abuse that came on and so bravely talked about their experiences. I want to thank Deborah Powney for coming on and talking about her research. On August the 3rd, I'll start recording season 2. So if you have a story to tell me, if you're a male victim of abuse, if you're a policeman, a doctor, or an organisation who's supporting male victims of abuse, then come on and talk to me. I want to hear from you. So until season 2, thank you for your support as always. Take care. I'll see you soon. Peace.
Nothing I could do is ever good enough for you.